In this portion of the video, I'm going to describe how you can run this activity with a little more hands-on, a little more interaction, usually age range or grade range between 4th and 6th grade. You'll want to make sure that you have at least 45 minutes to an hour because the portion of distributing the materials and all of the kids being able to do the hands-on portion takes a little bit longer than just the conversation, but the real meat is in the conversation itself. So you will have had the set-up conversation about what is a healthy food, what makes a healthy breakfast. You will have measured out the 6 teaspoons of sugar that the American Heart Association recommends that students should be their target, to eat no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day. Then at this point, you can either distribute materials to every student or to their tables. If they're clustered at tables, you can have groups of students working together. My recommendation is just hand out the cereals so that they're not fighting over which cereal they want or don't want. You'll find nobody wants the cereals that don't have a lot of sugar in it. And you really want to make sure that in your distribution, you have those cereals as well so that you can compare the cereals that have a large amount of added sugar with the ones that don't. I also recommend making sure that you add granola into the mix because this is one that surprises everybody. So you'll have 5 or 6 cereals that were handed out. You want to remind students that this sugar has been used over and over again by hundreds of students over a couple years. Not every student remembers to wash their hands, and you don't know where their hands have been, so you may not want to put it in your mouth. Students will be totally grossed out by this, and you're going to hear lots of those conversations, and I guarantee you're going to have students putting it in their mouth anyway. But word of warning, just let them know they may choose not to. So you're going to put the cereal boxes out to the table. Have students write the name of the cereal on their worksheet and have them write down to look on the side panel and write down and identify what the serving size is for their cereal. You can also have a cereal, either actual cereal or your manipulative that you've chosen, at every table. Have the students agree, because they won't agree. Some students eat cereal, some students don't, some eat a lot, some don't. Have them agree as a group what their portion size is going to be and have them pour it out. Many students will tell you to keep going and go to an overflow, and other students will be horrified. Just have them agree as a group how much cereal that they pour for themselves on a typical morning. How much cereal do they eat each morning before coming to school? Then you want to measure it out. This is where the beads go flying and the noise level's out of control, and that's half the fun of this activity. So we've put it in the measuring cup, and we've identified that this portion is 1 cup. 1 cup of cereal. So on the sheet, you want to identify, number 2, how much is your portion size? So students will write down that in this example, it is 1 cup of cereal. Then they need to do the math, and we have done a handy calculation sheet for you so that it identifies if your serving size identified on the package is of a certain size and you've poured this much of that cereal. This is the multiplier that you will use. This is the complicated math that we're supporting the students, not worrying so much about the math, but more about the activity. So you will give them the answer, and then the fun begins. You can have the students choose, again, put these in order of what they think is the most and least amount of sugar that you find in these cereals. So many students will have the conversations about, well, there's marshmallows in here and there's sparkles on the front, and so that's a lot more sugar. So we're going to put it in the higher range. Cinnamon Toast Crunch, it's toast, so it probably doesn't have as much sugar. Some people think, well, granola is a super healthy cereal, so I'm going to put it down here next to Cheerios, and we'll put Honey Smacks next, and maybe Raisin Bran in the middle as well. So students will decide beforehand what they think. And you could either write it with a Post-it note and put it on the cereal itself, saying they're ranking this the lowest amount of sugar, and they're ranking this one the highest amount of sugar before they do the calculations, so that we have a place to go to after we've done the math. So then we'll have the students begin the work at their tables. Have the students look at the nutrition panel, and they've identified the serving size and the portion size. They'll want to look at how many grams of sugar are in each serving of cereal, and they'll have to do the calculation to figure out how many grams of sugar are in the portion that they poured. So the example here is a serving size of Honey Smacks is 3/4 of a cup, but we've poured 1 cup of cereal. So we would calculate it. We would multiply the 16 grams of sugar by 1.3 to identify how many teaspoons of sugar are in Honey Smacks. The students can then take their sugar and their bowl, and they can measure out how many teaspoons of sugar are in their portion. So 16 grams times 1.3 is roughly 21 grams of sugar. So it's 21 grams of sugar divided by 4 is how many teaspoons of sugar are in your portion that you've poured. So that would be 5 1/4. 3, 4, 5 1/4. So those students would identify Honey Smacks have 5 1/4 teaspoons of sugar in their portion. And they would write it on the Post-it note, or they would come up and write it on the whiteboard behind the cereal. So each table would spend the time doing the calculations. We would have them hold up the amount of sugar and compare it to how much sugar is recommended, how much added sugar is recommended that they not eat more than in each day. And you will find that the order will be different than what they suspected. Of course, there are some of the suspects that you know will be higher sugar, the ones with colors. Actually, the surprise for many students is that Lucky Charms is fairly low in sugar. It's going to be more about 3 teaspoons of sugar in a portion, which surprises them because there's marshmallows in it, and they think marshmallows are made up of only sugar. So then you have to wonder, what's your marshmallows made out of? Raisin Bran tends to be high in sugar. Some of that is natural sugar as well, just from the raisins. But oftentimes the manufacturer will roll the raisins in sugar so they don't stick with each other. So while you believe that you're eating something super healthy, you're also eating a lot of sugar. The one that almost always surprises people is granola. So a serving size is a 1/2 cup. So you would double the amount of sugars that you find in a serving because your portion was a cup. So it's 26 grams of sugar in a cup of granola. So that is even more sugar than you'd find in your Honey Smacks. A lot of that is because in granola, there's brown sugar, there's honey, often there's syrup in it. So there's a lot of different forms of sugar as well as the dried fruit. And so what's interesting is that many people feel, I'm eating granola because that is the best choice for me. I'm not saying it's not a great choice. We are saying that if you're looking at solely at sugars in your breakfast cereal, granola has a lot more sugar than one would expect. So you'd have your class put the cereals in order of how much sugar they find in their portion. Then you would wind up opening up the topic of conversation. What was a surprise? If you do have to choose a breakfast cereal that has more sugar in it, how might you feel during the day? How might you feel after eating it? or maybe an hour after eating it? How about when you get off the bus? Are you still full of energy? Do you still feel full? How might it, if you've eaten a cereal that has more than the 6 teaspoons of sugar recommended that you have in a day, how might that affect the choices you have later in the day? Would you have dessert at lunch? Would you have a creamy or a piece of cake after dinner? You have to consider, if I'm choosing to have all that sugar in the morning, how does that affect my choices in the afternoon? There's also the conversation around the different types of grains that you're putting in your body. If they're a whole grain, they're going to keep you fuller longer. If it's a very processed cereal or processed grains and you don't find whole grains in it, you're not going to be as full as long. So something like granola, while it has a lot of added sugar and natural sugar, you're also going to be fuller longer, and you're not going to be hungry until about snack time. Whereas some of these other ones that have a lot more sugar in it and processed grains, you're going to be hungry before snack time. How's that going to make you feel in class? Are you going to be able to pay attention? Why not? So other parts of the conversation, you might say, yeah, Cheerios doesn't have a lot of sugar in it, but it tastes really boring. How could you make a cereal taste more interesting without adding more sugar to it? There's an example right on the box front. They have added sliced strawberries to it. Ask students, what might you add to it that will make it taste better? Invariably, someone will say sugar. And that's fine too, but you can also say, have them guesstimate how much sugar might they add to it so that it is still less sugar than one of these other cereals. So after the conversation, after the discussion of choices that a student may or may not make throughout the day, we're going to be talking with them about, should you eat sugar? Should you have a lot of sugar throughout your day? No, for all the reasons that you discussed. We want to remind them that the American Heart Association recommends that a student their age or a person their age probably not consume more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar throughout the course of an entire day. That's a really long day. And so they want to think about how much sugar they're adding into their bodies all day long. Am I saying that they shouldn't eat sugar at all? No, not at all. I love sugar too. I just want them to be thoughtful about how much and when they consume added sugar during their day. They can also think about one small thing that they can do to reduce the amount of added sugar. Maybe they make a different choice at lunch or a different choice after dinner or that snack after school and before supper. You could also talk about other breakfast options. What might you eat that isn't a prepackaged cereal? What is something that you can have in the morning that fuels your day, gets you ready, but doesn't have a lot of sugar? So this conversation can go on all day. So at some point you're going to have to wrap it up. So again, you'll want to talk with the students about what do they think? What did this make them think about? And what is the conversation they're going to have when they go home? You'll find that the students may not come running to you the next day talking about how much sugar they had the next day, but they will be thinking about it. They will be talking about it. And you can even ask them, tell me, the following week, how much sugar you ate for breakfast. And I think you'll find that the students are being more thoughtful about what they're choosing.